Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to the first in our series of 3 webinars this spring, Why Invest in UX Design. My name is Richard Birchall. I'm Business Development Director at Ergo, and I'm joined by Matthew Keogh, who's one of our senior visual and UX design experts at Ergo, and he's going to be talking about what we think is a really interesting topic and is getting a lot of traction in our activities at the moment. Before I hand over to Matthew, just a couple of words on Ergo, because I know quite a few people have connected. Some of the names I recognize, others possibly new to our company. We've been around since 1993. We are now at over 400 staff and annual sales in our most recent financial year of 84 million. You will see our name in the press quite a lot for awards and distinctions which we compete for. And I think it's fair to say that we're ambitious, as you can see by the increase in our activities and financial results over the last few years. We've probably grown at a rate of 350% from that figure back in 2014 of 24 million. And we are headed towards in excess of 100 million in the next 12 to 18 months. Half of that has come about through acquisitions, 2 companies called Eyesight back in 2015 and Micromail more recently in 2016. A lot of you may be familiar with Micromail, one of Ireland's leading licensed managers and resellers based in Cork. In terms of the custom software solutions division, where Matt does a lot of his work, you can see some of the clients that we have there, projects that we've delivered recently for including people on site and also fixed price projects that we do. A lot of the work that we do is architecting great applications, primarily in the cloud, so both Azure and AWS. And then as part of that, there's quite a lot of design work in terms of the visual designs, how the applications look and feel. A large part of that activity is the actual development itself, as you would expect from a software project, and rolling it out successfully, then followed on by annual support, or in some cases end-to-end managed services. Last but not least, we do a lot of R&D. We've been supported by Enterprise Ireland in the past, and most recently, you might have seen in the press in the last month, have been awarded quite a large grant under the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund, along with Microsoft and a couple of other consortium partners, including RCSI. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Matt, and I'll come back to you at the very end for the competition that some of you may have seen, just to wrap up. So over to Matt.
Thanks a million, Richard. Hi guys. First thing I want to say is thanks very much for logging in today and listening in. And I really appreciate being able to talk to you guys about something that I'm really passionate about, UX design. So first thing I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I won't labor on this for too long. So I really started my journey in design here in Dublin in NCAD on Thomas Street. So my degree would have been in visual communications and visual culture. And visual communications is really graphic design, but also with a bit of psychology and really trying to understand how to design for your customer. Then I would have moved on and I worked in a design agency. We were doing design for both print and web, and I really started to get an interest in web design at that point. And then I moved on, then started working in Ergo. I worked in the marketing team. I did a lot of graphic design and some really interesting brand identity projects. Where that brings us up till now. So at the moment I'm lead visual and UX designer in our custom software solutions team. And on the right there, you can see an example of some of the work we've been doing recently for some enterprise and SME customers. Some really, really exciting stuff. So this is our agenda for today, and I want to frame this as well as much as an agenda. I want it to be our key takeaways for today. I really love for you guys to go away with an answer to that question: why should I invest in UX design? That's our main topic. And then I suppose what's also just as important then is what exactly is UX design. We're going to delve into that and figure it out. And then to explain the first two parts, I'm going to use a case study. There'll be multiple case studies through this, but this is another case study then about some great UX design. And then we're really going to get down and get practical about UX and talk about some short-term things you can do tomorrow that will help get you on the road to full UX process. And then those longer-term options and longer-term processes you can go through to improve your approach to UX. So let's get into the first section. So why invest in UX? So Ireland has seen a 320% jump in UX jobs in the past 5 years. And those figures are coming from companies like Ryanair, Glanbia, Accenture, Paddy Power, PwC. And just to talk about Ryanair for a second, it's an interesting one. I'm sure many of you might remember back in, say, 2013, like the image on screen there, the Ryanair website wasn't pretty, and it was getting quite a lot of backlash from people online. People did not have a good experience using the Ryanair website. But the thing I've noticed recently, I've been doing a project on airline websites, and what I've noticed is Ryanair have obviously massively invested in UX design, because in the past 6 months I've seen the site change 3 times. So they're really, you can tell they're looking at their analytics, and at the moment, this is what the site looks like currently. I suppose the big difference is you can see here in the flight booking dialog. On the old one, you had everything up. You could put in your date, your departure, your arrival, your adults. Whereas in the 2020 version, they know that the first thing a user wants to do is put in their destination, and then everything kind of goes from a step by step from there. So they're really looking into that. But then outside of Ireland, we obviously know that Google and Apple are the big players in pushing design first in everything that they do, and that has spread across all of these companies here as well. So these are some examples from companies that have some really heavy investment in UX design, and they have success due to this fact. And then this is a stat we found from McKinsey and Company. So companies with higher design investment are seeing twice as much revenue as the industry benchmark growth. And then if we look at this then from returns to shareholders, we're seeing twice as much revenue coming back to shareholders in companies that have higher design investment than the benchmark. So what are the benefits? What's the benefit of UX design? And when it really comes down to it from a high level, we're talking about an increase in revenue. That's the goal. That's an awful lot of the goals for businesses, or that is the goal for business, increase your revenue. But when we get down a little bit deeper, I suppose you might have an objective to increase your conversions. Again, will lead to higher revenue. You might want to increase your customer acquisition, customer satisfaction. These are all things that UX can help you achieve. You might want to increase customer retention. This is a big one for us. Increase user productivity. There's a lot of small things in the front end, on the UI of the screens you can do to increase that productivity and make, because time is money. Everybody knows we want to get the users in and out of the applications as soon as possible. And then you might want to reduce your time to market. And then also from a sales point of view, we might want to increase our signups, and we might want to increase our sales per visitor and increase our revenue per sale. So there are all things that UX can be utilized to solve. But then, okay, let's hop into the big question. What is UX design? There's an awful lot of definitions out there, and I really want you guys to go away with something that you can say. So what is UX? So when you go online, you look up Wikipedia. This is the long form example you get. User experience is a person's emotions, attitudes about using a particular product, system, or service. It includes practical, experiential, effective, meaningful, or valuable aspects of human-computer interaction. This is a very long-winded explanation. And lucky for us, the people at the UX Design Institute here in Dublin have a much shorter, sweeter definition. So user experience is how people feel when they're using a product, a system, or service. But what do we mean when we say how users feel? What do we mean by how users feel? So a user using your system or using a solution that you developed, they might say, I feel in control while using this solution. They might say, I feel confident using this solution. And it might make them feel smart. And then again, this builds trust. All those things builds trust in the product, in the solution. But then we really see the power of these emotions when we consider the opposites. The user might say, I feel out of control. I have no control over what I'm doing in this application or on this website. I don't feel confident about this system, this product, or the company that has developed it. I don't think it's going to work out well. I'm trying to organize my mortgage online, and it's not going to work out well. I don't think it's going to do what I want it to do. It's making me feel stupid. I don't trust the product, this app, or this company. So when we consider these are things we don't want our users to be feeling. And here at Ergo, when we work on a solution, we don't want our users to feel any of these emotions. And just to explain the idea of how users feel a little bit deeper, I'm going to use an example from a company, Mercedes. So Mercedes aren't known for creating great software, but they are known for creating great cars. So when Mercedes are designing cars, they use 3 types of design. They start with functional design and aesthetic design, and these are the two types of design you'd probably be very familiar with, function and aesthetic. Whereas the third one is often the one that's forgotten about. It's experience design. And the thing I really want to drive home here is functional, aesthetic, and experience design need to be working in tandem in order to create a great product, and Mercedes knows this. In terms of functional design, functional design is about the engineering of the car. How does it work? How fast does it go from 0 to 60? When we think about aesthetic design, how does the car look? What does the look of the car say about the product's brand? But then, okay, what about experience design? What do we mean when we say experience design? Experience design to Mercedes is about how people feel when they sit in the car and they drive it down the road. What does it feel like when they put their hands on the steering wheel? What does it sound like? What does the car sound like? And what does it sound like when it's idling in traffic? And then doing some small mundane things like putting your shopping in the boot. What's that like? That's what Mercedes wants. They want all these experiences to be good experiences, and this will all affect the user's trust of the brand. So Mercedes identified all these details, and obviously because we know from their success for having luxury cars that they have identified the details that matter to customers, and that's in a way is also what UX is about. It's identifying those details that really matter to your customers and your users. So next, I'm just going to go further into into industry we're in, into software, and I'm going to use the example of Blackberry. So this is the Blackberry Z10. The Blackberry Z10 came out in 2013. Blackberry had a lot of success before this phone. You might remember they were top of their game in the handset market. They had really good innovation in terms of getting email on the go, and they had a messaging service that was much like WhatsApp today. So what was different about this phone? In terms of our functional and our aesthetic design, functionally the phone worked really well. The design it worked well. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. In terms of aesthetics, by the standard of the time, it looked good. In terms of, we're thinking about Apple. Apple hadn't had the latest software updates. It doesn't look like it was today. And then Google Material Design really hadn't gotten off its feet and gone across the whole system. So in terms of functional aesthetic, it looked good. But again, what was the experience design like? And now the people at Mashable, on YouTube, they've released a video of some usability tests, and here on the right hand side you can see some of the reactions of the people people were given the phone. They were asked to complete some simple tasks like logging into the phone, and they were given no instruction of how to use the phone. They were saying, okay, pick up the phone and log into the phone, unlock the phone. But then they really struggle. You might see on the expression on the people's faces there. They really struggle to log into the phone. And you can see in the top right-hand corner, the guy is actually looking at the back of the phone. He's looking for a button to log in, my mistake. He's looking for a button to unlock the phone. Didn't realize that they could actually unlock the phone from the front by swiping up. But that was a new thing at the time, and people didn't develop that mental model for that at that time. So people were perplexed using the UI, especially like once they did get into the phone, they struggled to find their email, to find their messaging. The whole system was a completely new design. So the thing about this then, it didn't work out very well for Blackberry. Blackberry had so much unsold copies of the unsold stock of the Z10 that they actually had to go up for sale, and they went bankrupt. And this is a company, we're talking about a company who were top of their game in the handset market. And just because of a bad user experience, people didn't say good things about the phone, and the sales didn't go up. So what was the problem? Like I said before here, people had to swipe up to log in, and then it was all gesture based then from there, and to move out of an app there to swipe in the corner. It's quite similar actually from today's version of the iPhone. You might remember from the iPhone 10, it's all gesture based. There's no buttons at all, but people weren't ready for this yet. And BlackBerry, this is the key thing. BlackBerry hadn't done the research to find out that users were going to struggle with these pieces, so they weren't able to change it in time and before the handset was released. And that brings us back to our model of the 3 types of design. So functional and aesthetic design are never enough. You need to get that experience design piece right as well in order to create great products. It's not enough just to have functional design, because when people are struggling with the experience of using the phone, they don't have any time to appreciate the functional and the aesthetics. So let's do a quick recap. So user experience is how people feel when they're using a product, a system, or a service. But here's just another quote from Coleman Walsh at the UX Design Institute. He says, if you're not doing your research, you're not doing UX. And that's a really good, I suppose, that from our case study just before, they didn't do the proper research, so they didn't go through the right UX process. So back to our agenda. So we've talked about some reasons why to invest in UX design, and we've established what is UX design. Let's have another look. Let's have a look at a case study that describes that piece that I was just talking about, that research piece, and that's really what great UX design is all about. It's about research. So our example here is actually from Heinz. So Heinz had the objective where they wanted to increase sales of tomato ketchup. In order to do this, they conducted research with families in their homes using ketchup at home in their natural habitat. They just sat in and observed how they use the product. And they learned 2 things. First of all, they learned is that children consumed twice as much ketchup as a 4-year-old would consume twice as much ketchup as a 40-year-old. And then the second thing they learned is that kids then didn't actually have control of the ketchup bottle. If you remember, I'm sure you do, of these old ketchup bottles, you used to have to turn them upside down and smack on the end of the bottle in order to get the ketchup to come out. And what would happen when you give the bottle over to a child is the ketchup would go everywhere. It would cause a big mess. And the parents then just said, well, I'll do it for you. So Heinz identified this issue, and they were like, okay, our number one consumer of the product, the kids, don't have control of the bottle. How do we change this? So Heinz then went away and they did some design and prototypes, and they came back with this. So this is the Heinz Easy Squeeze tomato ketchup bottle. And basically what this did is allowed people to dispense some ketchup without creating a big mess in a relatively easy, relatively mess-free manner. So that was it's a really good example, because so Heinz discovered then, as they discovered that consumers that were using the Heinz Easy Squeeze saw a 12% jump in consumption, and that's a really, I suppose, a good business mark to say that's actually made a massive difference. That insight we gained has actually led to an increase in revenue. That's a really good example of research affecting the bottom line. So we've had a quick look. We've had a look at why we might invest, what UX is, and then we had a look at some case studies. So I'm going to get straight into our UX maturity model, and this is really the practical stuff in terms of what you can do tomorrow, and then what are the longer term options for adding some UX processes to what you do. So I'm going to use an example of an application we were recently building, a planning application for planning projects. I'm going to use that as an example just to talk about some of those really kind of simple short-term things you can do to improve the UI. So that's level 1 here. So we're talking about thinking like a UX designer. Our first one is thinking user first, and that's a big one. And then making use of common components and methods. And I'll go into these in our example. And then again, making it obvious. So that's what we're going to focus on first. And then I'll go through the other 2 levels then. So first, get straight into it. This is an example of the planning application I was talking about that we were recently developing. So this is a planning application that users to create new projects, to look at their old projects and go in and look at the details. And you can see we have project codes, version, date created, author, and then we have in green on the right, you can see all the different options a user might have to edit the project. And see what if we're going into our level 1, then and our first thing on the list then is think user first. So what would we think about when we're thinking about using first and making this application a bit more user friendly for that user? And if I was a user, what would the first thing that would draw attention would be this section here on the right hand side. So what we see here is that's all, like I talked about, it's all your options of what you can do, but there's an awful lot of repetition. When you go down the lines, you actually find that the same icons are repeated over and over again, and that's taking away from the information on the left hand side. The left hand side has all that good stuff that really helps you to differentiate between the different levels and the different projects. You know, project 1, project 2, they're the things that differentiate between them, and the stuff on the right is getting in the way of that. So what can we do? What would I do? So basically, what I do, see in the red box there, what I've done is I've put in a menu instead, and this is a common menu in the Google Material Design, as a Google Material Design component, and you'll see it across a lot of, if anybody's familiar with Gmail or any of the Google applications, you'll see this menu an awful lot, and that's one of the reasons why we would make use of something like this. That brings me on to my second point: make use of common components and methods. People know how to use this menu system. It's across the web. It's fairly common, so you can be quite sure that you can trust that people will know when they click onto that menu, they're going to open up the menu. So that's our menu here. You can see I've put in all of those elements that we had earlier, but instead of them being up on the screen, they're in the menu. And then just to talk about Google Material Design, I would use that as a resource quite often when creating prototypes or creating designs for solutions. As it's all up there. You can see each component that you might want to use to solve a particular problem, and it has guidelines on how you should use it, how they recommend you should use it. It's all up there for free. But just while I'm on that point, I'm just going to mention there's an awful lot of good software out there. What I'd love you guys to go away with is to start to open your eyes to all this really good software we're using every day. Instagram, Windows has a great suite of applications. Facebook, Apple has a great iOS. There's some really good inspiration in there for how we might want to improve our user experiences. So then, so here's our menu then. So the next thing then I would move on to look at then is, obviously we actually have a menu up here in the left hand corner, and that menu system, behind that menu we find a couple of navigation options. So what do we have? We have My Planning, User Manager. We have a User Manager system. The My Planning is where we're at, and the help screen, and then we have our logout, and our up above we have the status of which user is signed in. So on the face of it, this is quite useful, but when we're thinking user first, back to the first thing, we think there's not very much in this menu. There's an awful lot of white space being left underneath, and then as well, we're leaving all this information, these important navigational components for the user to get around the app. They're behind a click. They might not know they have a user manager. They might not know the help screen until they click that. So what can we do to make that a little bit more obvious and bring it up and bring it to the front? So what I would do is, instead of having a side menu like so, I would actually put them into a tabbed menu. You'll see in the blue box there, and we're moving on to our third point, is making it obvious. And we've pulled that stuff out of menu, put it into a tabbed menu, so someone in one click can click through the different. There's not very many navigational points on this application, so we might as well put it into a tab menu and make it easy for the user. And then the second thing I'll draw your attention to is we've actually moved our status of the user out above, so that the user can see exactly who's signed in and don't have to click in to find that out. And also the logout button. The logout button is an interesting one because you don't want users to feel like they have to look for their way out. You don't want a user to feel like they're stuck in your application. So if you can put the logout button up on the front screen where it's clear and they can clearly find their way out, it's always a benefit. So when we're talking about making it obvious, what else here can we do? I'm drawn to this button here. This is the new button, and believe it or not, actually, this is a quite an important button. It's quite set back in the design currently, but it's quite an important thing because this is what this application is all about. It's about creating a new project and then managing. The secondary option then is about managing the projects you've already created. But if you want to create a new project, you have to click this button. And it's not very obvious because it's set back a little bit. So in order to make this button a little bit more obvious, what I do is I'll change the color. Bright positive colors like green are always a good way for creating new items in an application, but also we'll move it into the center so it's right front and center. The user can't miss it. It's right in the middle of their vision. But then to take it a step further, which I think is actually even more important, is let's think about what does it say? It says new. Like new is pretty obvious. We can probably ascertain that that's going to create a new project, but it's not super obvious. We could actually probably make it more obvious. What exactly is this button going to do? It needs to tell the user that when they click on that, it's going to create a new project. What we do is we just change it to create new plan, make it more obvious. We have the space there. We might as well make it easy for the user, so they're not thinking about what exactly is this button going to do when I click it. And then if we take that knowledge, then we can apply that to the search bar as well, actually. Instead of just having an icon like we have now, we'll make it into an icon plus text. So they're not just guessing, okay? And it's always good to just, if you can make things more obvious, it's always good. So that's some small little pieces we can do to improve on the front of an application. Really small things, but they just make things that much more obvious and a bit easier. And you're going to, again, these are all talking about that increasing in efficiency of your application. So then just to move on to our level 2 low-cost UX activities, and we're going to talk a little bit about gathering some information through online surveys, and then 2 big parts of the UX process that we in Ergo would actually go through, and every project is about creating prototypes and creating wireframes. So let's get straight into it. So the first section, conducting online surveys. Everybody knows making online surveys is really fast, really cheap, really low cost. And there's a lot of free survey tools out there. We're talking about SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is a great tool for collecting data, and the analytics that it produces after you do your survey are really, really powerful. And again, it's a really easy way to gather user requirements. You could have users who are using your application. You could have 500 users. You might get 250 coming back. That's some really powerful data you're after getting, and that could be full of really interesting insights, analytics, things where you can make those complex business decisions that are very difficult to make. So there we go again, powerful. It's powerful data, and we're talking about those insights. And just staying on that point of insights, I was recently conducting a survey about airline websites, and what I found was, it was really interesting that came out of a survey, is that the person would always go with Ryanair, and they left the reason why they do that. So on the left, you can see that Ryanair actually has like you put in your location, your departure and your arrival, and you put in your dates. Ryanair actually shows you the dates that they're not flying. You can see that in the red box there. They're grayed out. Whereas if you look at Aer Lingus on the right, you'd almost think that the Aer Lingus are flying on every one of them dates. But whereas on Aer Lingus, when you click search at that point, what you find is actually they don't fly in those dates. They've made you you put in all your data and you've clicked search, and it comes back saying, and we don't actually fly. So go back to the last screen and put in all your details again. Whereas a Ryanair, this particular user that came back in the survey noticed this, and they never use Aer Lingus because of that reason. So it just shows you those small little kind of details that Ryanair obviously, Ryanair uncovered this through a UX process. It could have been a usability test where they discovered this is an important thing for users, and the latter might make them move to another application, another company. So then to move on to prototypes, what is a prototype? So a prototype is a first draft of a solution that you create, but it also is a great way to create more solutions based off of that. So we'll make one prototype, we might try and change it and move it on. We use prototypes quite a lot here in Ergo, because prototyping saves cost. Like, you can put down you might have a user with a problem. You can prototype your different options of what you might do to solve that problem. And then obviously that saves you costs in the long run, because if you just go straight into your first idea and then you go into development, those long hours of development, and then it comes out in the end and we do some testing, we find out that the users are struggling with the application. It's not quite as efficient as we thought it was going to be. If we can mitigate those issues early on in prototypes, we're going to save ourselves an awful lot of money. So it's a very important part of UX design. A prototype is a really good communication tool. We use prototypes quite a lot to send our prototypes over to customers, and customers will be able to come back straight away to us on bits that they like, bits that are working, with bits that aren't working. So then also there's an awful lot of good applications online nowadays for prototyping. Marvel, Balsamic would be versions of low, and you create prototypes, but at a very kind of basic manner. So you might you might do a few sketches, scan them in, you can link them up, and you have a working application on your phone then through Marvel or Balsamic. And we'd use them a lot in the early stages of our solutions and our projects. But InVision really is the one that we use for when we're talking about producing something that's quite very, very, very similar to what will come out at the end code in the end of the project. We'll create that and we'll send it over to our client. So this is an example of what it might look like. This is an app we developed for a client, for contractors to put in their timesheets. And what you can see is there's actually, you can see quite a lot of detail. It's quite similar to what the end piece ended up looking like. And then as well, the great thing about this is it's a really good collaboration tool. At the bottom there, you can go into comments mode, and our customers can come in and leave comments on the different parts of the application. There could be a typo somewhere, like we put in there, or we could be missing a screen, or we could have forgotten something, or they might have discovered something that they needed to add in. And it's a great communication tool where we can be really explicit of exactly what we're talking about. So if we quickly move on to wireframes, wireframes is a part of the UX process where we create a blueprint for development. So basically the difference between a prototype and a wireframe is like an architectural drawing of the application. If you think of an architect developing his architectural drawing for a building and handing it off to the builder, and the builder knows exactly then what he's going to build, whereas a UX designer will hand over his wireframe over to a developer, and the developer will know exactly down to the pixel exactly what he's going to build. And that's a really, really good benefit. It's a single source of truth. When we create our wireframe and we're sure it's the right, we've worked out in the prototyping stage exactly what we want, what the client wants, and what's going to work. And then in the wireframe, when then everything is down to the pixel, and then everybody is aware, I suppose, of exactly what we're going to build. And again, it's like I said, it's an essential part of the UX process. And just to go through the differences, this is an example of a wireframe versus a prototype. The prototype is on the right. You can see it's actually quite close to what we might finish and what the end solution will be, and that's an InVision. Whereas the wireframe on the left, you can see there's an awful lot of detail. There's we have the typography, we have the spacing between different elements and the color schemes. All of those really important things a developer needs to know in order to create a product exactly as the design team is intended. And we will collaborate an awful lot on this stuff, and just to make sure that's exactly what the prototype that we send to the client will look like. So then to move on to our level 3, we talked about thinking like a UX designer, and then we went through some, I suppose, prototypes, and wireframes are an essential tool, and they're really good way of saving money. And then we're moving on to, so let's talk about depth interviews, usability testing, really important, and we'll touch on contextual queries, and we might not get time for A/B testing, but I'd be happy to talk about it at the end. So if we move straight into it, go straight into depth interviews. What is a depth interview? So a depth interview basically is when a UX designer does a consultation with a company. He might go in, he wants to talk to the users. So he'll take the users who are going to use the solution that we're looking to develop, and he'll try and uncover the goals, the behaviors, and the context of that user. What is the user trying to do with the solution? How do they go about doing it? And what kind of, and then the context, I suppose, is what kind of device are they using? Mobile, desktop, tablets? They want to find out all this stuff. We're not going to get into technical detail at this stage. Depth interviews are really about getting to know the user, getting to know the person you're designing for, and I think that's really important. The great thing about depth interviews is it's low cost. You could do 5 depth interviews with different people in one day, and you're coming away with an awful lot of really good research data, of which you can use later on down the line to help make decisions in the application, because you know the users are the people that are going to be using the application, so their word is law on this stuff. So if we go into usability testing, it's a similar kind of setup, and again, a similar kind of benefits. It's very low cost. We could do 5 usability tests with different users in one day. And what's involved in the usability tests is we have a moderator, which would be a UX professional like myself, and would go in, meet a user, and then we would set up the application we want to test on the laptop. And the UX professional, the moderator, would just observe and give the user a couple of tasks to complete on the application. And we record the whole session on the screen, so we see exactly what the user is doing on the screen, where they've clicked, where did they struggle a little bit to figure things out. And it's really good data. So we have all those recordings coming away. And then when we have those recordings, when we have those meetings with the development teams, where we're trying to make decisions on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, we have the concrete evidence there of the user using the application. And that's a great source of truth of exactly how the users experience the application. And again, it unites everyone behind the common cause, the user. That's the important part of this, is we can't have any, I suppose, discussions about what features should we add, what shouldn't we add. We won't waste time on that because we all understand what the problems are because the usability test showed it. And again, if you have any assumptions you want to make about the application, about what the solution is going to do, you might do a usability test to try and confirm that that's what users are going to do. So the great thing again about usability tests is that they're really highly cost effective with a high return of investment. And then just to go through exactly what's involved in usability tests, I really want to stress how simple this is. It's not a scientific experiment. We just have a user. It's here in a circle, the moderator observing the application, and then the solution running on the app. And we'll have some software in the background recording the session, and we'll record the session, what we say, what the user does. So we have all that rich data in order to make decisions down the line. So then just to talk about contextual inquiries, it's actually very similar to the story I told earlier about Heinz. Contextual inquiry is good about going in and sitting in and living with the user. So it's almost like, you might know a term called shadowing. It's quite similar to that actually, except instead of learning how to do their job, we're actually just observing and trying to get their goals, behaviors, and context. And again, it's really powerful. You can really get to know the people you're designing for, and I think that's really important. And again, it's low cost. Like, we might take 1-2 UX professionals over a couple of days in order to learn where does the solution fit in the day-to-day of these people? Is there other solutions they're going to use in the round? Are they collaborating on the solution? We'll find all this stuff out in the contextual inquiry. So that then brings us back to our maturity model, and we've gone through a lot of it, and we've gone through most of it. And we started with thinking user first, making use of those really good resources online, and having a look at applications that are out there that are already doing a really good job. We thought about making it obvious. Don't make the user guess. Use good text to make sure people know exactly what they're doing. When they click that button, what are they going to expect on the next page? They should already have an idea of what they're going to do. And then the other thing, level 2, then we moved on to talking about cheap online surveys and how powerful they are in giving you insight into what the user is thinking. And then talked about prototypes and wireframes, and then some processes, those depth interviews, the really simple usability testing, and the power of contextual inquiries. And we haven't touched on A/B testing, but again, happy to talk about it. So if we're talking about our agenda, I'm just going to finish up now on our agenda and our key takeaways, just to reiterate on some points. So why invest in UX design, and what are the benefits? UX design has become essential to stay competitive. We can see that with the companies that are producing such good user experiences, I should say. Like, people won't settle for a slow, inefficient software. They need to have good software, and it's really important that we invest in it. And we've seen from the stats that companies that do invest in it have higher revenues coming in. What is UX? User experience is how people feel when they're using a product, a system, or service. And we really want to find out what those feelings are, because there can be the really big pieces that'll help us develop our products. And then we had a look at our case studies, and the case study really hammered home how important research is in your projects. We remember Blackberry Blackberry they didn't have an awful lot of success because of the lack of research they did in that project. So, and then we moved on to our UX maturity model and talked about those short-term pieces, and then I suppose it's thinking user first, and the longer-term options. And the great thing I want to stress, I suppose, about the model, the maturity model, is that Ergo, we'll work with you to find the best possible process, best pieces of that model to work on to create the best possible software that will work and delight your users. So I just want to touch on this quickly. We're running a competition at the moment, and it's a chance to win a half-day UX consultation with our custom software solution specialists. So the question I want you to answer is, we talked about the 3 types of design that go into designing really great solutions, and we know the first 2 are functional and aesthetic design. But what is that 3rd type of design in the red square there? So if you have an answer to that and you're interested in a UX consultation, email your answer to Richard's email is up there if you want to take it down. I'll leave it up for a second. Email that answer to Richard, and so thank you. I really appreciate you guys listening in. I love talking about this stuff. UX design is really interesting, and I hope you have some questions for me. Oh, actually, I see there's a question already in here. So do you, Aoife Costello has put up a question. She asks, do you use a particular app or software to record users doing usability tests? We do actually. There's a piece of software that works. We work on Windows. I know there's one for Apple as well. It's escaping me right now, but the one we use on Windows is called Camtasia. And if you can look it up online, there's actually a free trial version you can use, and it helps you. It records the screen and it captures the audio and everything that's going on the screen. So I hope that's helpful, Aoife. Is there any other questions there for me? I'll just wait for a second to see if anybody has anything they want to type. Oh, here's another question coming in from Mark. Thanks a million. I saw one question he has is, you go about showing, this is his question, how do you go about showing the value of level 3 research to clients and other stakeholders? I work in an agency, and it's something we run regularly when people are focused on output and not necessarily outcomes. Oh, okay, I understand. So really, it's about how do we decide whether, okay, how do we convince people that, okay, doing our usability tests and doing our depth interviews, how are we going to get value from that time? And I suppose that's a big one. The way I would talk about it is we need to think about those big, huge success stories that are out there, those stats that are coming in, and they cannot be ignored. Like UX design and understanding your user is so important in creating great software. And really, if you don't do those tests up front, those usability tests where you can work out the kinks, there might be some glaring errors in the development. And if you don't test those things, they'll come out and then at the end, and that will cost you even more time. You'll get the benefit of it, I swear to God. It's well worth it. I wonder, is there another question coming in here now? Okay, no, it's a similar question. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up now. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm gonna move over to pass you over onto Richard now. Thanks a million. Thanks very much, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Matt. That was really very informative. So there's a lot of content in there, and as I said at the beginning, it's a topic that we're particularly finding a lot of interest in at the moment. So just to bring your attention to a couple of other webinars that are coming up in March and April. Next month, we're going to be addressing the topic of managing and monitoring your applications in Azure. So obviously plenty of focus on the cloud at the moment and Azure, but this is specifically going to be looking at running applications in there, managing your consumption, and also looking at some of the tools in Azure Monitor. And then in April, we have MDM, which is master data management, and again around the theme of portals, just to cap off this series of 3. So thanks again for joining us today. You have my email there for anybody who wants to send in further questions, and of course we will be getting back in contact with you regarding the outcome of the competition. So have a great afternoon, and we will talk to you soon.